And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Too Many Bones. Now, Too Many Bones, that's a cool inside of the box. I never really looked at that. This is a giant box. This is from Hoplomachus Games, or Chip Theory Games, I'm sorry, the folks who made Hoplomachus. Chip Theory Games, and their theory of games is to use poker chips. And in this game, also dice. Now, this is called a Dice Builder RPG. You're going to take a very unique character with a lot of dice, and you're going to use them to go through a campaign together with everybody else. So there's a lot to look at in this game. I'm going to give kind of a brief overview here right now. Okay, so first of all, we're going to take a look here at the characters. There are 4 characters that come in the base set, and there's other ones you can get. So we have Boomer and Patches and Tantrum and Picket. Each of these characters is extremely different. So Boomer is kind of someone who throws bombs at the enemy. Patches is a bit of a healer. Tantrum is a berserker type character, and Picket is kind of a shield or a tank, but also has some other special abilities. When you pick these characters, you're going to get a token for your character. So, for example, Picket here is a blue, which means Picket's also going to get a bunch of blue dice. The game comes with containers. These are all the blue and the gray dice. This is for 2 of the characters, and the other 2 characters have red and yellow dice. Now, 4 of the dice that Picket is going to have here are stat dice. Now, at the beginning of the game, his stats are going to be 5 health, 2 dexterity, 1 attack, and 2 defense. But as the game goes by, these stats might be increased, and so he'll be using these numbers to go up into different stats. And basically this also tells some more information about him up here. Captain, Hero, Protector, Warden. He has an innate special ability, and then he has a bunch of extra dice that have a possibility of getting down here. Now each character comes with a full-blown sheet of information about them. Now this sheet of information is going to tell you on the different dice they have. This has all the different icons and what those icons mean. This tells you a little bit about each of their dice, and it tells you if they start with a specific dice. So Picket doesn't start with any dice, but he has different dice that he can get. And then on the back, it talks about backup plans, special abilities. It tells you what you might want to pick and do when you're first putting him together, because you have some initial stats that you can add your character. It talks about his innate abilities, and it clarifies some of the skills that he might have. Now, I mentioned that Picket is going to have dice, and as the game goes by, he's going to get specific dice. The dice are numbered, so this dice is number 1, so stay on ground. As the game goes by, you're going to have a chance to upgrade your character, and you can upgrade stats, or you can take new dice. You're never going to get all your dice, so you're going to have to pick which dice. The first dice you might pick would be one of the starred ones. So if I take die 1, I now have a stand ground die, and then I can get a sword advance or a shield form. Well, I'd rather have the sword advance die, so maybe the next time that I upgrade, I'm going to take this die. Now I have this die that's basically my pool. Then I can get lockdown if I want to. Or I might decide to start out here with confidence. So I might take this one, which then lets me go to these 2 spots. So I can go over here. I can take red shirt, which then lets me have intercept. These 4, I can take any one of these because they all have a star. Each character has extremely specific dice. And in combat, you're going to have a pool of dice. The pool of dice that you have is going to be equal to your dexterity. So a higher dexterity will give you more dice. Dexterity will, how much move. Each time you move will be one of your dexterity. The number of attack dice will be here, and the number of defense dice that you will have here. Attack and defense dice are generic dice. The game comes with piles of generic dice, and you will have these dice in your pool. But again, the most dice you can roll is your dexterity, and then that's the number of attack and defense dice that you can use. Plus, you have these other dice where you'll be able to roll them. Like this one here, this confidence die, is a bunch of shields on it. But it also has a skull on it. This one here can give me upgrades. Some of the dice, when you roll them, will go up into a locked position and give you an upgrade for the remainder of time, as long as you have that there. Some will give you a permanent active ability that go here. But many times you'll roll bones. Now, the game is called Too Many Bones because it's all about rolling these bones. And when you put bones up here, as you save up these bones that you get, you will be able to do special abilities, to use these and get special abilities. That's called a backup plan. And if you get 6 of them, you'll be able to even make your innate ability better. But of course, that means you're using a lot of dice and getting them stuck over here. So that's about the characters, and honestly, I could spend a whole lot more time talking about each character and how specifically they are. Like this guy has a rage, which he's going to increase and do powerful attacks with. But he has a lot of other things too. This guy here has ways to heal people, but he also has different ways to attack with different kits. And this person here is trying to get pieces to these different grenades. Once she has grenades, she then has different grenades that she'll use and lob at people and blow them up. When you play the game, you're going to be picking one of these big, bad, nasty guys to go against. This is the bad, nasty guy. The icons at the bottom are going to be the kinds of enemies that they're going to bring with them. There are certain numbers that you have to get to finish before you get to these guys and fight them. And it will also give some special abilities when you get and fight the big bad guy themselves. You're going to be fighting on this board here. Now, to get to this board, you're going to be going through several encounters. At the beginning of the game, you are going to build an encounter deck. This encounter might have some specific encounters that go along with your tyrant, the big bad guy you're fighting. Some special encounters will be showing up, and then just different encounters. And when you get to an encounter, you'll flip it over, and it will often give you 2 choices. Most of the time, you're going to end up fighting some people. And then the choices might have a reward based on what choice you pick. And at the bottom, you'll get a reward. You need to go through, like I said, a certain number of encounters to get these gear points to end the game, to get to the big bad guy. But they also might give rewards like get treasure cards. There's a lot of different loot cards that characters can have. These loot cards are sometimes one-use only items or different things to upgrade. And there's even trove loot, which is really cool loot, but you're going to have to roll some lock-picking numbers to unlock the different treasures. And then these treasures also do a whole variety of things. When you get to a fight, you're going to have a certain number of points that you fight, and that depends on how many players are playing and what mission it is. And so let's say you're fighting 8 points worth of bad guys. Well, you would take 1 5-point bad guy and 3 1-point bad guys. That would be how you do that. There's 1s, 5s, and 20s. And these guys are going to show up, and they're going to show up. The first one will show here, number 1, and he's a melee unit, so he would show there. The second one is going to show up here, number 2. He's also melee. Third one's going to show up number 3, also melee, and the fourth one also melee. So they're all going to show up here. The good guys are going to be placed out on the board too in melee or ranged positions, and then you're going to roll initiative. Each player has a very specific initiative die with different numbers on it, and you're also going to be rolling initiative for the 4 colors. Each of these characters is going to be matched to a color. It's the color that they start in, so you can put these colors underneath them just in case they move around and change lanes, so you can remember what color they are. Also, they're also going to get a certain number of hit points, and this whole game operates on hit points. So this guy has 5 hit points, so you just put 5 chips underneath him, and as he takes hits, you just knock those off like that. And your characters will also have hit points underneath them based on how many hit points they have, which is going to be your health stat and how far you've improved that from the beginning of the game. So you're going to be rolling these dice, these initiative dice, and you're going to be placing them in order. So the 5 character will go first, and then maybe the player 4, then 4 and 4, then the 3s, and then the 2 characters is going to go. And when it happens, each character has very specific, they're kind of programmable, the monsters, and they have different stats on them as how much damage they'll do. They have special abilities on them, and there is another sheet that tells you all the special abilities of the bad guys as you fight them. They're going to come and they're going to attack, and you're going to lose hit points. If anyone's ever killed, their initiative die is taken off, and everything else is kind of juggled, and you're just going to go. The easiest way to do it is just to move them up like this. Okay, it's this person's turn, this person's turn. And on your turn, you're going to get to make attacks and actions. I told you there was attack and defensive dice. There's 1s and 2s on the attack, 1s and 2s on the defense, and there's bones, of course, that you can miss, but then they can go in there. And so that's it. A battle can be an actual pretty long affair as you're slowly taking time, tactically moving around, deciding when to use your special dice that you have just to make a base attack. Who are you going to attack? For a regular melee attack, You have to attack someone who's directly next to you. A range attack can hit anyone on the board. The attacks are very, very simple. You don't have to worry about line of sight and things like that. Once the battle's over, if you lose or if you're knocked out, if a character is knocked out, there's a recovery thing. They're going to come back in and heal up, or you get to do something at the end of the turn, like trade loot, make a lockpicking attempt, or basically heal. And that would happen if you're knocked out. If everyone's knocked out, you have to kind of go through and replay it again. You can't move on or anything. And there's other things. There's a whole section on lockpicking. There's a whole section on a game called Dangerous Charts. And you're going to keep going until you fight the big final bad guy. Each final bad guy has their own specific chip that they'll come out with, and a bunch of course, health chips and things, and they'll bring out different characters with them. And if you beat them, you win the game. Now, Too Many Bones has a few problems with it. First of all, I'm not a fan of the graphic design or the plastic cards. The plastic cards slip around. I've never been a fan of that. Even these are okay, the reference sheets, but not a big fan. I really don't like the artwork. The artwork for the characters is okay. The artwork on the item cards is like this weird, like you found this on a parchment somewhere. I'd rather see some cool looking, brighter artwork. And the whole game, the poker chips are really good. The character poker chips, these poker chips are less quality, but they're hit point chips, so who cares? And that's really neat. The dice, it's cool. There's a ton of dice. And I think they're like laser printed on the sides. I'm not sure how they're printed, but they look cheap. They don't look like quality dice. I don't know how else to explain it. They just look cheap. Yeah, there's a lot of them, though, and they are easy to read, so I'll give them that. And there's a lot of things. My other big complaint with the game is really this is a ton of information. I mean, a ton. And there's so much. You are constantly referring to this, constantly looking at this. That's what that does. That's what all this does. There's a lot. And because of all this information, there is a steep learning curve to the game, especially since each character is very different. If you're playing the character who throws potions and bombs and things, you really got to figure out how she works, because you're like, okay, I need to collect parts. So sometimes I'm going to roll a dice in a combat. This dice is not going to help me, but I'm doing it just to get parts that I can save from round to round until I get enough parts to change those into grenades, and then I got to build it up. And that works. You understand that once you know what you're doing. But at the beginning, it's a hard sell. So there's a lot. I mean, your first time you go through, and the fact is the rules aren't very well written. They're okay. But I was constantly saying, can I do this? Can I do that? The rules were kind of written out of order in some places. And there's a lot, just like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get through all that. You can also die instantly in a battle. The battles in this game are fairly lengthy. This is a very long game, by the way. They tell you that some of the characters are longer than others. I don't know what it says on the side of the box. It says 60 to 90 minutes. That is the short end of this, folks. That's 60 to 90 minutes for 2 players, playing the easiest character as fast as they possibly can. We're talking 2-3 hour game. Easy, maybe more if you're playing one of the longer campaigns. But you can also, the battle can be long, and if you get a low initiative, it's very possible the enemies can take you out before you get to fight. Sometimes it happens. It can be random luck, the dice rolled, and it's just bad luck. I mean, you want to go first, maybe roll some defensive dice to kind of get those ahead, because defensive dice are not rolled in response to an attack. They're rolled as a prevention. It's kind of a different style attack system. But that can be not fun, and sometimes you just get one shot at it and you're out. And so, not so keen on that. The board is also very abstracted. You saw the battle board, very abstracted. Now, I say all that because despite all that, I still really like this game. Like, I'm rating this game probably an 8. I would probably rank it a 9.5 if it had better production values. I mean, don't get me wrong. The production values on a lot of this stuff is cool. I love that these mouse pads have these open spots on them. That's really neat. The poker chip quality is high. It's just that the whole thing has a cheap look to it beyond all that. And it would be like a 9.5 if that stuff was better. And also sometimes it's just not fun for someone to get one shot at. In fact, we played it. If someone got one shot, we just restarted the campaign, because it's just not fun to have someone die instantly in a battle. If you die because you made a stupid move or you moved too close to the bad guy, that's one thing. But you know, the game, it has the same problem that Gloomhaven has, is that it starts out really hard, and then you're like, oh, but this one keeps ramping up the hardness too. I mentioned Gloomhaven because this game is very similar in feel to it in many ways. This game is like a big puzzle RPG, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to use my character. And I love the diversity between the characters. And there's characters I haven't even touched yet because there's extra characters. I haven't messed with those characters yet, just with these 4 characters, and I like how different they are. I actually think I prefer the game with 2 players. 4 players is fine, but it can take a while for your turn to come around, just like I like Gloomhaven with 2 players. But I love digging, like, ooh, what combos of dice? And each time you play, you can be like, all right, last time I went that route, but this time I'm going to go this route. Like I said, each character has those 16 dice. You're not going to get all those 16 dice up, but it's so much fun when every time your mission's over and they're like, you can upgrade a point or 2. I'm like, ooh, what am I going to upgrade? Oh, I should upgrade that stat because I really need more dice per turn. But at the same time, I want one of my special dice, and I love those choices. They're incredibly fun, and it feels like you have this unique thing, and they're not necessarily, again, they're not in the, we don't. I said the one person was a ranged lobbing, and one person's a berserker, and one person is the tank and takes the damage. But that is not necessarily their only function too. They're more nuanced than that, and I find that to be a lot of fun. This is a game that you're going to delve into. Like I said, it's called a dice builder RPG. I think it's kind of maybe too far. It's really a board game, right? But at the same time, it is an RPG. I wish there were ways maybe to make it so you could play like a mission or 2 and then save your stuff and go through to where you had all 16 of your dice, and then you're fighting big, nasty monsters. And you might, maybe there's a way to get to all your dice if you play these really long missions with the bigger monsters. But still, I like that you can go back in. The replayability here is high. The insert is great. There's a ton of components here. Just a lot going on. This is a very high recommendation from me. I think, it shows that whole Kickstarter thing. I think they could have probably made it a better produced item, but wow, this is still neat. Too many bones. And even that concept of building up the bones to getting off an attack, with a better rule book, slightly better art, even as it is, I'm very, very impressed with this game. Too many bones. Dice Tower Judgment, excellent!
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.